Well, what an absolute pleasure it is to see you all, and what a privilege it is to be here this afternoon. For those of you who don't know, my name is Matthew Cliff. I am the Executive Officer here at Cherish Life Queensland. For those of you who are unaware, Cherish Life has been around for over 50 years defending the cause of life. We're one of Australia's oldest, and we've got a few fans over there, which is okay. So thank you very much. Our goal at Cherish Life is very simple, guys. We want to do two things. We want to educate all people on pro-life issues, and we also want to advocate on your behalf to the people that have the power to make the changes that we want to see. So that's our goal as an organisation, very simple. Friends, we gather here this afternoon for a common purpose, don't we? We gather together because we have a shared conviction that every life is precious and worthy of protection. We gather here because we believe that every life, from the moment of conception, has value. We gather because we believe that every human being, regardless of the size or level of development, has inherent worth and should be treated with dignity and respect. We will march together not as just as individuals, but as a movement. And our walking is a way to advocate against for those who are the most vulnerable amongst us. However, before we do, we have some fantastic speakers lined up. Individuals that have courageously and consistently stood up for life. Our first speaker is the CEO of the Australian Christian Lobby, the ACL as it's known. The ACL is a political advocacy group, and for nearly 20 years, the ACL have been a prominent voice in defending the most vulnerable amongst us. As I've just mentioned, we're blessed to have Michelle Pear here, join us from Canberra. Michelle is great, a very busy woman, but we are grateful for you, Michelle. I'm not quite sure where she is. Oh, there she is, brilliant. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon, and we're looking forward to the message that you have for us. So without further ado, guys, can we give a round of applause to Michelle?
Life is sacred. From the moment of conception until death, humans are made in the image of God and have inherent dignity and worth. When Wilberforce campaigned against the slave trade, he humanized the slave. There was a picture of a slave kneeling on one knee with a phrase around the picture, and it was presented on a coin, and the phrase said, "Am I not a man and a brother?" Today we need to stir the consciousness of our nation and declare about the child in the womb, am I not a son or a daughter? The unborn child certainly is a son or daughter. The child in the womb is filled with dignity and worth simply because they are human. The circumstances of conception or the capacity of the mother does not determine the inherent dignity and worth of the preborn child. The brand new life that burst into being with a flash of light is gloriously human, made in the very image of God Himself, and is made worthy of existence. The 10 Commandments tell us do not murder. In fact, the Commonwealth Criminal Code supports that notion. But nearly 100,000 babies are murdered every year in Australia. When Wilberforce was campaigning against the slave trade, he shocked and disgusted the upper class by taking them onto a slave ship where they could smell the stench of death. They could smell the vomit and dysentery of the slaves. He stirred the moral conscience. The reality is that abortion is hidden from the public, bagged as medical waste and then incinerated. What would the politicians do if they were confronted by the torn limbs or fully formed fetuses that have had their lives ended? Surely it would provoke a reaction. I was shocked when I attended the Senate inquiry regarding babies who survive abortions. And there were many that were invited to speak. And as we spoke, we shared the vivid and tragic stories of babies who had survived abortions and were left to die with no medical care. When we were sharing these stories, some of the committee members, not the ones that were pushing this bill, but others, showed no reaction, no compassionate response. Did they think we were lying? When we think to the barbaric times when babies were sacrificed to gods, we are shocked that society could be so evil. Yet here we are in 2024 sacrificing the lives of babies. You know, when I first learned about abortion when I was a child, I was sickened. Not because I was legalistic, but because I immediately thought of that precious baby. Perhaps because I was Christian, I had a God consciousness. But every human has a God consciousness, even when they don't know they have it. And how is it that if we have a consciousness that we are allowed to have such great inhumanity in this nation? You know, the Bible says in Romans 1 that they are without excuse. Paul the Apostle says that although they claim to be wise, they are foolish. It is absolute foolishness to think that the child in the womb is anything other than human. Just as human as you and I, just as human as the Prime Minister and politicians, just as human as children, that are being killed in war around the nation, just as human as children suffering from hunger, just as human as children caught in sex trafficking. These are all equally just causes because they are all human. The reason why children are saved from the ravages of war, the reason why children are provided food to eat, the reason why children are rescued from trafficking is because people of compassion do good works. How is it that people motivated by compassion to do good works around abortion clinics are being criminalised? How is it that good pregnancy support centres that do amazing work are not recognised by the Department of Health as organisations that you can refer abortion vulnerable women to? How is it that abortion grief is not recognised in the psychiatric profession? Why are all these things which make good sense being shut down? Because those that claim to be wise have become foolish. You know, society goes through times where we move from idealism to realism. The idealism of society today is that we can be our own gods. We can be unconstrained and treat life and gender however we want to treat it. But I believe we are moving into an era away from idealism to realism, where wisdom will return. Foolishness will be revealed for its folly, and we will see reality, the reality of human life within the womb. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved wretches like you and I. We as a nation are lost, may we be found. We as a nation are blind, may we see. May God open the eyes of our nation, may his mercy be upon us. You know, we praise God for the beautiful rainbow that he created, in which he promised never to destroy the earth again by a flood, a sign of great mercy. May by his mercy, the foolishness and blindness of this nation be turned to wisdom and sight. May we see the child in the womb not as an image in the ultrasound, but as a human worth of dignity. A son or a daughter, a future musician or mechanic, a farmer or a philanthropist, a future teacher or tradie, a sister or a brother, a future mother or father, a future grandmother or grandfather, a precious life to be lived. There are so many ways that we can have a compassionate response on this issue. We can support pregnancy support centres, post-abortion grief services. We can pray, and we can pray outside abortion clinics before the police catch you. And you can make your vote count when it comes to election time. I can 100% say I will vote for a pro-life candidate, even if it's not my preferred party. Because this issue is above politics. This is human life. This is not a right-wing issue. This is not political. This is justice and compassion. This is about precious human life at its most vulnerable stage. These are babies, sons and daughters, created in the image of God, equally deserving of being cherished, just like you and I. God loves every one of these babies, and so should we. Thank you.
Fantastic. Let's give Michelle another round of applause. Fantastic. What a blessing. Now, our second speaker this afternoon is the leader of the Katter's Australian Party, Robbie Katter. He's also a sitting member for the electorate of Traeger. As a party and as a member, both Robbie and the Katters have consistently voted against any attempt to introduce abortion legislation. That's amazing. Not only that, he has just recently sought to introduce bills that attempts to protect the most vulnerable in our society. As Robbie is about to comment on, I'm sure, in March he introduced a bill to amend the termination of pregnancy guidelines to legislate that life-saving treatment should be legislated and provided to babies who've been born alive as a result of a failed abortion procedure. What a blessing. Incredible. So as you welcome up Robbie to the stage, again, let us honour him with a big round of applause. Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you, Matt. It's really an honour to be here because there's a lot of people here that speak that are listening to what I say, but it's a great opportunity for yourself to reflect about what you should say and why I am here. And I'd like to start off by saying, I guess it's a poor attempt at a joke, but a lot of people say to me, oh, you wear a hat like your father. And it came quite naturally where I said, no, I wear a hat to keep the sun off my face. And listening to Michelle, she talked about reality. I live in Mount Isa where people plain speak, and we try and create these abstract arguments around things and you know, aggregate these issues and say it's all too big, it's insurmountable, and it's this abstract idea. It's not, it's pretty plain. and that's what I'd like to just talk about today. If you see a baby in a burning building, you're going to run in and save it. If you see a baby in a swollen river or fallen in the pool, you're going to run in and save it. If you see a doctor trying to kill a baby, you're going to try and save it. And if we're in politics, if you're in the lunchroom at work, if you're in a conversation at a party, it might be that conversation you have that triggers a saviour, another decision made in a year's time or 2 years' time. And that's what I'd like to talk about. I think I was discussing with a friend a day or two ago about what to say, and they said probably talk about the why you would participate in a debate like this, put a bill up. And there's probably a few easy reasons. There's a couple of people here today said why don't you do this bill? But I guess to give a deeper answer to that, I think, and I think this builds into this point of what can we do as a call to action, is I think a lot of it's about having a purpose-driven life or a value-driven life. Not just based on values, but driven by values. And I guess as you mature, I was a pretty nervous politician here at the start. I wasn't going to take on stuff, but as you mature in life, in a lot of ways, and I think that maturity comes with trying to build back to your values what they are and give you that strength to fight the arguments and despite the noise that you might hear in the background, to default back to those things that give you purpose and meaning. And I've been 12 years in the Parliament now, and I guess there's a lot of stuff in the Parliament, and I could argue the electorate I represent is filled with trouble and adversity. So there's a lot to keep me busy day to day as a politician, and I could quite easily justify my existence here by saying I'm working hard for my electorate, but I guess a lot of us have that burning sense of there's got to be something bigger we're here for, and there's got to be some purpose and value drive and driven purpose to our life. And I guess that starts to overwhelm you, and we can't stand by while babies are being killed and seeing them die and do nothing. And in a way, I've said to a couple of people today, it's been very nice, people pass compliments to our party and saying thanks for your stand, and there would be an argument to be had there to say, why didn't you do it sooner? Because this stuff was here and it's been staring us in the face, and like many other people here, we get confronted by fear of many things, and I think that's the real challenge. The real challenge that we have in Parliament and everywhere, it's on a very personal level, facing that fear. I think one of the other motivators as well, I remember talking to Matt recently, who said I think it was about 5%, you said of the kids in the UK, babies were killed because they had a cleft palate. I've got a goddaughter who I'm very fond of, has Williams syndrome, and one of my cousins has daughter with Down syndrome, and another, my sister's got a kid with autism. And I suppose there's a lot of people out there think they should be knocked on the head when they're kids. But, plain speaking again, that is just, I can't get my head around the wickedness that is sort of involved in that way of thinking. I think a lot of people say to me, what can we do, political, and we look for political answers, and that's a good place to look. I mean, there is a responsibility in the Parliament. We do pass the policies and the laws, but politicians read the crowd. And so, a lot of what happens there is the result of they're trying to read the public, and so then it becomes, how do we as politicians, how do you as individuals influence that thinking broadly out there? How do we influence that? And I think it's in considering that question that I think the focus on doing things at these big arguments and having the rally and being in politics, all very important, an essential part of a movement. But I think perhaps much more important is the action that you take in your everyday life for the rest of this year. Not the action of just being here today, but how we live our lives, how we show respect to human rights, to humanity, to our community, our responsibility to community, how we show respect beyond today in our interactions. And I think it is those incremental interactions that take courage. And I'll be the first to admit I would probably fail daily in my responsibilities in standing up for my values and what are the values that drive me. I think I do it daily. I'm sure a lot of us do. But I think that's the real challenge and take home for us is this push doesn't stop here with the rally or the bill in Parliament. It is a daily challenge for us for the rest of our lives. In those interactions we have at the lunchroom and our social groups, to not walk away from the argument, to not be scared of it, to not be scared of these things, which I'll say again, which I quite often do. But we've got to answer that call to be active individually, and I think that's the way this will be won. And in that way, you are not powerless. You have all the power individually yourselves to make this happen, perhaps more than myself, Matt, Michelle, anyone here. Individually, you have all the power. Collectively, if we go out there and there's 10,000 people at lunchrooms within the next 2 weeks saying it's not right to kill babies that are born alive, I think we're on a good pathway to win that logic and reason out there, and those people that are out quiet, silent, scared to come out. Let's be brave individually from today on in our conversations, in the way we live our life, that we will support each other and support those babies that are being killed. So look, that's as simple as it is for me. There is a political struggle. We have a job and a responsibility there to act with and be driven by our values, not even acknowledge our values, but be driven by them in the Parliament. We have a responsibility, and I think as individuals, and probably more importantly, I as an individual have a responsibility to follow those values in my interactions personally when we walk away from here today. Thank you very much for being here. It is an absolute honour. I get paid to do this, most of you don't, and I'm very humbled by the effort and the care that you all have for this very important issue. Thank you, Matt.
Brilliant, fantastic, Robbie. What a blessing to have courageous MPs like that, eh? Fantastic. And just to touch on this bill, we're blessed. We've got a public hearing on the 19th of August, so keep in contact with Cherish Life and we'll still give you an update on what's going on with the Babies Born Alive bill. So our third speaker, Anusa, has come all the way from the other side of the country, even though, well, via New Zealand. She's here representing a pro-life group called Right to Life WA. You know, look, as Robbie just mentioned there, often the discussion around abortion can take place with an emphasis on an argument or a debate, we're seeing that, rather than on people. And friends, listen, abortion isn't just a political issue, it isn't just a medical issue, it isn't just a theological issue or a legal issue. For many, it's also a deeply personal one. For every single child that's aborted, there is a mother and a father. And tragically, many people may never have found themselves able to speak about their abortion story through either fear or shame or guilt. And that's a tragedy, isn't it? And we are blessed this afternoon because we have Anusa here who will be sharing her personal post-abortion testimony with us. Anusa, thank you so much. And we just want to give her a round of applause.
All right, g'day Brisbane. Hey. Firstly, I just want to say that it's one thing for us to get up here and be courageous, but it's also a courageous thing to just show up. It's a courageous thing to be pro-life. It's a courageous thing to stand for truth. So I want to honour each of you as I thank you for the honour that it is for me to speak and share my story. So I grew up in a beautiful Christian home. I attended pro-life rallies and prayer vigils. From a young age, I knew abortion was immoral, it was murder, and it was a choice. I could never fathom how a mother could ever do that to her own child. I fully understood that modern child sacrifice was masked under the absurd conceits of reproductive health care and women's rights. I thought it could never touch my life. When I found out I was pregnant at 25, I was terrified. I believed I wasn't ready for a baby, having just overcome a 6-year battle with an eating disorder that almost killed me. I had just gotten my life back. I wasn't willing to sacrifice it for a child or a disinterested partner. The doctor handed me a pamphlet with my options. Murder was an option that was under a more acceptable name. I was told I could take a few weeks to decide, but that after the 12-week cutoff, the procedure would become more serious. This advice was called women's health care. Despite my many problems, I knew anyone could get access to everything needed to see a pregnancy through. I walked into that clinic, but I had already committed the abortion in my heart. I decided that my life, desires, fears and plans were more important and valuable than my child's life. I rationalised the sin and I reassured myself, despite it going against everything I believed, it was necessary for my future. There was too much at risk. I kept repeating, I'll make the sacrifice count. I'll live for the two of us. I convinced myself that the high price was necessary and that I would just have to deal with it. I lied to myself in every way, knowing deep down it was wrong. On the way to the clinic, I prayed that I wouldn't see my mother, who had been a faithful witness out the front of Perth's abortion clinic for years. The nurse performed an ultrasound before the abortion. I heard my baby's heartbeat. I expected to feel liberated, and that's the deception, right? Choose yourself, make your own choices, put your needs and desires first, and you're a strong, independent, satisfied woman. Instead, I woke up and returned home feeling cosmically empty. A chasm I didn't know existed within me, pulling me into an endless black hole. From my very core, I had been shredded apart. I was excruciatingly empty. I was cursed. I had murdered my own child. My child. There was no way to undo what I had done. I'd only ever dabbled in alcohol and drugs, but the agonizing heartache and rage so possessed me that when I was offered a chemical escape, I readily took it, going on my first methamphetamine binge, using anything to suppress the relentless guilt and rage and shame. Sin always leads to death, and death exploded inside me. The sound of a baby crying would send me into panic attacks. I had horrific nightmares, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. The insecurities and mental health struggles I thought I had conquered when I beat the anorexia returned with double vengeance. Drowning, all consumed by what I had done, I tried to convince myself that it was okay, but reality proved otherwise. Feeling trapped and unable to face reality, I chose to block it out. By 27, I was a heroin and whatever else addict. During another detox rehab stint, I found out I was pregnant for a second time. Aborting my first child had annihilated me. How could I willingly choose to destroy another life, and with it all the horrible consequences that I was being destroyed by? Yes, I did it again, fully aware of the truth, but driven by my own goals. I blanked out a lot of that time. I decided to give up on life. I had dug such a deep grave. What more could I do now than lie in it? I didn't have a way out. I deserved hell. I knew that. That's where monsters live. And if I wasn't one already, I certainly was one now. After the abortion, I went straight to my drug dealers to get back on the heroin. My downward spiral continued, taking me from Perth to New Zealand, Tasmania and Melbourne. Each place brought new horrors through chemically fueled, violent relationships. I was on and off the streets, a criminal, in and out of rehabs and psych wards, barely alive and dead inside. But, as we all know, the God of the Bible is in the business of raising the dead, amen? In a desperate final attempt, my family flew me back to Perth and into a Christian rehab. My 22 months there were miraculous as I encountered true hope, health, and healing. The Lord's grace began transforming my heart of stone into one of flesh, resuscitating me in every way. Yet, I kept my abortions behind an impenetrable wall. I was terrified of facing my darkest sins. Whenever I had discussed my abortions in the past, people offered me great sympathy and treated me like a victim. While I have been a victim of many things in my life, abortion is not one of them. I knew the truth. I was the perpetrator, not the victim. I chose to have sex, and I chose to get onto that operating table. Christians sounded like non-Christians, reassuring me I wasn't at fault, blaming the establishment, the abortionist, men, the government, partners, mental health, social and economic circumstances, anything but me and my murderous heart. I loved those lies. I truly believed that if I opposed this narrative and revealed the detailed truth of my past, not only would people be disgusted by me, but God would never love me. I so desperately craved his acceptance more than anything. I desperately wanted to believe all these people, to somehow pass on the responsibility to anyone or anything else. But I knew in my heart that these were pretty lies. I could not escape it. I not only needed salvation from my own evil, I needed salvation from trying to deny it. Have mercy on me, O God, because of your unfailing love, because of your great compassion, blot out the stain of my sins. Wash me clean from my guilt, Purify me from my sin, for I recognize my rebellion. It haunts me day and night. Against you and you alone have I sinned. I have done what is evil in your sight. You will be proved right in what you say, and your judgment against me is just. In 2020, my church leader, Brian Tamaki, taught about the abortion law reforms in New Zealand, allowing a baby who survived an abortion attempt to be left to die without assistance. I was shocked. The Holy Spirit inside me ignited, and I knew I had to be involved in the stand against this evil. I reached out to the Right to Life, Western Australia, and Steve Plump warmly welcomed me into the fold. Tongue twister. It was through volunteering with this ministry that I would more fully realise the true glorious power of the gospel in confronting the most wicked of sins. I also finally realised that I could never forgive myself. That's the point. I was a genuine sinner in need of an absolute saviour. Self-forgiveness was a fairy tale. What I truly longed for was absolution. I needed my sin taken away, freedom from its agony and the destruction of my sin on my soul. I needed Christ, not self-esteem. I couldn't survive without him. Purify me from my sins and I will be clean. Wash me and I will be whiter than snow. Oh, give me back my joy again. You have broken me, now let me rejoice. Don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain of my guilt. Create in me a clean heart. Put a new and right spirit within me. God looks at our hearts. He already knew what I had done and the corrupt lies I had wrapped it in. He had already nailed it to the cross and died for my crimes. He was waiting for me to come and lay it down, and finally, I did. Now, what has all this got to do with the law? If abortion had still been a criminal act in WA, I would not have murdered my children. Legislation matters. We must boldly pursue changes to the law that will end the slaughter. We must rally behind government officials and parliamentarians that are championing life and pursuing the abolition of abortion in Australia. We must defy politicians who think that they can decide who has the right to live and die for the convenience of others. But what has this got to do with our hearts? The heart is where the root of this evil dwells. We all love pretty lies. We rightly say, love them both. But do we love them both enough to speak the truth, no matter how offended or uncomfortable it makes people or even ourselves? Anything less will not lead to freedom, salvation, healing, and wholeness. When we skirt around the reality of abortion, and when we don't challenge women who murder as much as we challenge doctors and legislators, we deny both women and their babies the power and salvation of the gospel. It is the gospel of Jesus Christ that has set me free from condemnation and shame. He has forgiven, healed, and restored me. Because of him, I can stand here and confess what abortion really is. It is war against heaven itself. Thank you.
Wow, what a story, eh? Let's give another round of applause for the courage for Anusa to share that. Now, our final speaker this afternoon is an absolute social media dynamo, and I'm sure many of you are already following her. Jo is doing an absolutely incredible job in bringing this issue to the forefront of the Australian public. Being a professor of law, Jo has a unique legal perspective on the issue, and Jo, we're grateful for you. I know you're going through a few trials at the minute, but we're grateful. So let's give a bigger round of applause to Joanna Howe.
Hi, Brisbane. you guys? So good to see you. I was here last year at this march and I think we've got even more people here today, so thank you so much for coming out. This is a massive year for Queensland. It's a massive year because it's an election year. And so what we do matters. And I'm going to talk to you today about three guys. Their names are Stephen, David and Robbie. All right, we got that? Stephen, David and Robbie. Let's talk about Stephen first, Stephen Miles. What do you think of Stephen Miles, guys? Yeah, I reckon we could double that noise. What do you think about Stephen Miles? And I've got to say to you, I've got a very similar opinion of Stephen. So I've thought about this long and hard. I've done a lot of research, and the way I put it together is he's either really, really dumb or he's a massive liar. And I know they're a big claim to make. That's a massive claim to make. I could get sued for defamation for that, but I'm going to substantiate it now. He's either really dumb or he's a massive liar. And I'm going to tell you about the first time I met him. A couple of months ago, in April, I think it was, I was in that building in your parliament. And I flew here for a press conference because Robbie Katter had the courage to introduce a bill that would protect babies born alive after an abortion. And I was waiting to accompany Robbie at that press conference. I had a group of people with me, including a friend who was filming and getting ready to film that press conference. The press conference started late because they were in the chamber still and Robbie hadn't come out. And as I was standing there waiting, I could see, so it's this balcony. I don't know if you guys know it because it's inside the parliament. There's this square balcony. And I'm on one side waiting for this press conference to happen. And I can see on the other side the chamber and the politicians beginning to exit the chamber. And you know, it's my first time there and I saw Stephen Miles. I saw Stephen Miles walk out of the chamber and my heart just started racing. Because I was like, there's Stephen Miles and I know the truth about Stephen Miles. And in a split second, I turned to my friend and I said, come with me and don't stop filming no matter what you do. And I walked across that balcony. I didn't ask anyone for permission. I didn't tell Robbie what I was doing. In fact, he wasn't even there, I don't think, at that point. And I just walked across that balcony to Stephen Miles where he was standing and he was taking a photo with a fan. And once they'd taken their photo, I walked up to Stephen with a big smile. I think he thought I was another fan. And I said, excuse me, Premier Miles, can I have a chat with you for a minute? And he smiled, you know, that fake politicians, that lying politician, that fake smile that lying politicians give you. Gave me a smile. He said, of course. And I knew I wouldn't have much time before they booted me out of there. So I said, Premier Miles, when you were Health Minister in 2018, you introduced a new law that would allow abortion up to birth. And at the time, you told the Parliament there will be no increase in late-term abortions under my new law. Is that something you still stand by, Stephen? And he looked at me awkwardly and he looked at the person filming and I think he started to realise this was not going to be a friendly chat for him. And I just went straight back in and I said, do you still stand by that claim? Because in just 4 short years after you introduced abortion up to birth in Queensland, you said it would not increase, but it has doubled. 152 babies were killed, gestationally viable babies in 2018. Fast forward 4 years under your new law, Premier, and it's 304 babies killed. That number has not just increased, it's doubled. And he looked at me and he said, there's no evidence for that, there's no evidence for that. And he starts running towards the door. What a coward, can't even face up to the truth. And so I started running too, as did the girl that was filming. And I was wearing these shoes, so you know, it was harder for me than it was for Stephen. But I chased him and I just said, there is the evidence. Your own Queensland health reports show 152 babies were killed in 2018, 304 in 2021. What do you have to say? He's like, there's no evidence, and he shoots through that door. At which point I can't chase him, but he calls his henchman, who call the parliamentary whip, who then comes and finds me and tells me I broke a rule. I mean, what a joke. I'm in the people's house and we pay his salary and I want to ask him a question. He doesn't even know the data or he's lying to cover it up. Shame on Stephen Miles. And the next time I encounter Stephen Miles and his office is about a month and a half later. And I'm back in Brisbane, and this time I'm going to Stephen Miles' electorate. And on my Instagram and Facebook, I'd reached out to everybody and I said, come and join me because we're going to letterbox Stephen Miles' electorate so that everybody knows what he's done. And so a whole bunch of women came to help me out, and we had a flyer and we explained, it's got the screenshots, it shows how the numbers are doubled. And before we letterbox his electorate, I go up to his office, to the parliamentary office that he has. And I walk in and I speak to the lady at the desk, the staffer, and I say to her, excuse me, my name is Joanna Howe, and I've just got a leaflet to give to your boss about how the late-term abortions have doubled since he was health minister. And she said, oh, that's a lie, that's not true, you know. So similar thing to what a boss says. And then I say, it is true. Look, I printed out a leaflet actually so that you can see the screenshots from the health reports. And she's like, if you don't leave, I'm going to call the police. Now, look at me, guys. Do I look threatening to you? What do you reckon? I'm like 5 foot. I barely make 5 foot. And I'm scared of mice and cockroaches. I mean, to be fair, she wouldn't have known that. But, you know, I wasn't raising my voice. I'm a little lady, and I was in there for a grand total of 6 minutes. But guess what she does? She rings a special hotline and she calls the police. I'd already left by that point and I was letterboxing with the ladies in his electorate. But what we see is 2 police cars with sirens blazing, racing down the street for little old me. Like, that is a total abuse of power, right? Like, you know, these people will go to any lengths to cover up their shameful conduct. If you want to see what happened next when the police came, you'll have to look on my Facebook and Instagram at Dr. Joanna Howe and check it out. Follow me, find out what happened there, because I had a great chat with the 2 cops. I reckon they're not voting for Stephen Miles for the next election, let's just put it that way. So that's Stephen. You can tell I don't think very much of him, and I'd probably give him a 1 out of 10, if that. But let's talk about David. David's a bit more complex, isn't he? Because he's from the Liberals, and we traditionally think of the Liberals as a party that stands up for human rights in utero. But I've got to tell you about David. You know, he's from the Liberals, he's the leader of the Liberals, David Christoffoli. And there are some great Liberals, people like Amanda Stoker and Mark Robinson, amazing people. Amanda Stoker and Mark Robinson, courageous politicians. But David, he's not one of them. I'm going to be honest with you, and no one pays me to say the stuff that I say, and I'm just going to tell you straight. David is not one of them, okay? He might vote the right way if forced to, kicking and screaming because there's a pro-life bill on the floor of the parliament and he then votes the right way. But he is not going to courageously introduce laws that protect the human rights of children in utero. David Christoffoli is just not going to do that. In fact, when asked by a reporter, what are you going to do are you going to do anything about abortion over the next 4 years? He said, abortion is off the table, I'm not going to do anything. Now that is not good enough for me. Queensland is the abortion capital of Australia. I expect more of David Christoffoli. Do you expect more? It's not good enough. Stephen is terrible. David is like marginally better. Because if forced to, kicking and screaming on the floor of the parliament because somebody else has the guts to introduce a pro-life bill, he might just vote the right way. But he's not going to be the man who stands in the parliament and protects the children in utero and fights for their mums. David's just not that guy. So we need to do better. We need to vote and bring in better people. So the third guy I want to talk to you about is Robbie. What do we think about Robbie Katter, guys? Now, Robbie's people, the way this all happened, Robbie's people reached out to me a couple of months ago, early last year, and they said that Robbie was interested in doing something on the abortion issue. And you know, I've put my life on the line for this, my career, and daily I am getting threats I'm getting harassed, I'm getting bullied. And so I didn't want to just join up to any politician without vetting him first. So I put Robbie through a grilling. Isn't that right, Robbie? We spoke on Zoom, and for about an hour I grilled him because I wanted to know that he was a man of integrity and he wasn't just doing it to buy votes. And I'll let you know Robbie survived the grilling. So I asked him questions and I could see that he genuinely cared. He didn't want to look like he was doing something. He genuinely cared about children in utero and protecting them, and he cared about their mums. And so now Robbie has introduced this new bill that would treat babies born alive in Queensland no different to any other baby. And this is a really important issue. I just spoke to a midwife today. I interviewed her. I'm going to have to put that on my YouTube and cover her identity because I can't imagine how they would come for her if they knew who she was. But, she blew the lid on what we know is happening. In Queensland, babies are born alive after an abortion. If they receive care, if anybody picks them up, that's the midwives and nurses who are doing it. They don't have those rights under the law. They can be left on a dirty pan dish in the slot room. They don't get that care. The legislative right to care is not there, which is why we need Robbie's bill to pass. And so my message to you is this. Come October, we have an election. And if you have a Katter Party MP in your seat, you need to put Katter number 1, because a Katter Party MP is pre-selected on being pro-life. So you could be in the Liberal Party or the Labor Party and you might be pro-life, like Mark Robertson is, and I applaud him, like Amanda is. But not everybody in their party isn't. Tim Nicholls is a disgusting Liberal MP who supports abortion. We have to get Tim Nicholls out. And then in Labor, you've got all these pro-abortion loving MPs. But if you vote for the Katter Party, you will get a bill, you will get a party, you will get a person that will bring in pro-life bills, and that's what we need. Now, if you don't have a Katter Party MP in your seat, come October, you need to look at the How to Vote cards that Cherish Life and ACL will produce, because they will tell you who is the most anti-abortion politician in your seat. And it might be a Labor person, it might be a Liberal person, it might be a One Nation person. But you need to vote for the person, not the party, unless it's the Katter Party, because they're the only pro-life party that is proactively bringing bills in this state. All right. I'm sorry to get so bossy. I'm sorry to get so bossy, guys, but I feel like we've just got to get this right, because Robbie has introduced the first state-based pro-life bill in nearly a decade, which is why we have to get behind this party and reward them at the ballot box. And finally, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a professor of law and a mum of 5 kids, and I live in Adelaide with my amazing husband, James. We're just here for the day. And I'd love you to connect with me on social media through following me at Dr. Joanna Howe. Like I said, I receive daily abuse, harassment and bullying, and even right now I'm fighting an investigation to save my job. That's what it takes when Robbie was talking about lives on the line, for the lives that are really on the line in the womb. And I'm going to ask you to get your phones out now and to scan this QR code. So you'll see them around the crowd. You'll also see some flyers being passed around. This QR code takes you to an open letter to Stephen Miles. And the open letter demands an urgent inquiry into late-term abortions in this state that have doubled in just 4 years. Already we have 9,000 signatures on this petition. I want to double that today. I want you guys to spread the word, because the only way we will change this is if you help me. So if you sign this petition via the QR code, I just encourage you to take out your phones and make your voice count, because you need to join this campaign. It is not enough to turn up to the march once a year. We need to put our lives on the line. Right now, 88,000 children are killed every year in Australia through abortion. Just in the time we've been at this rally, 10 babies in utero have lost their life. Queensland is the place with the highest number of abortions in our country, and late-term abortions have doubled in just 4 years. Imagine where we will be if we do not shout this from the rooftops now. Let's turn, with your help, Queensland from the abortion capital into the place that protects children the most in our country, and let's change to starting today. Thank you very much.
Wow, let's give another round of applause for Jo again. I know she has a lot going on behind the scenes, so we're blessed to have you, Jo. Well done. Now, before we march, a lot of you guys may be thinking, look, what can I do to help? As you know, the forces against us are well-resourced and well-funded. We have the backing of influential institutions and much of the complicity of mainstream media. But we have something they don't, do we? We have the truth. Okay, and the truth is, again, that life begins at conception and deserves protection from that moment forward. But again, we still need your help, guys. This event is free, but would you please consider making a donation to support the cause of life in Queensland? As Jo just said, this is the abortion capital of Australia. Every dollar that you give helps us to provide resources, education, advocacy, again, to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. With your generous financial donations, we can make a difference, and we are making a difference. So would you please visit our donation stand just over there under the tent, and there are people on hand there to take donations, whether cash or by card. Again, let us remember that as we march, let us carry the voices of those who cannot speak for themselves. For too long, society has treated the lives of unborn children as disposable. Friends, this is a tragic and unacceptable reality that we must work together to change. This is why we march. We march because we want our society to recognise the humanity of the unborn and work towards a culture that supports life and cherishes life. We march because we want our lawmakers, just in this building next to us, to protect the rights of the unborn and to create and safeguard laws that respect the sanctity of human life. So with that in view, let us march.